What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? Noah Gray here, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Josh's channel and check out showmefootball.com for more.
What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com, covering your Kansas City Chiefs. And we've got some breaking news this morning as the Kansas City Chiefs are finally bringing in a wide receiver as they are trading for Tennessee Titans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. The Kansas City Chiefs are reportedly sending over a 5th-round pick that could conditionally become a 4th-round pick to the Titans in order to acquire the talents of DeAndre Hopkins. The original report came from Adam Schefter saying Titans and Chiefs are working to finalize a trade that would send wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins to Kansas City, league sources tell ESPN. And then I pulled this follow-up tweet from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN that says the Chiefs wanted Hopkins in 2023 free agency, now double back for much needed help. And I think it's very important to include the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs had predated interest in DeAndre Hopkins, which is why his name was once again floating around in rumors this time around. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans don't appear to be going anywhere this year. DeAndre Hopkins is an older veteran receiver that is much better suited playing on a championship contender right now, as he is in the twilight of his career. So it makes a ton of sense for the Tennessee Titans to offload Hopkins and at least get an asset back for him. And if you're looking at this from the Kansas City Chiefs perspective, you're getting an impact wide receiver for no more than a day 3 pick. Even if it conditionally becomes a 4th-round pick, it's still a day 3 pick. You'll give that up all day to get DeAndre Hopkins when you're trying to go for a 3-peat. His fit on the Kansas City Chiefs made a ton of sense 2 years ago when the Chiefs originally wanted to sign him. But if you guys remember, back then, Chris Jones was sitting out for his extension before he got it, and he was on the franchise tag back then, and that really hampered the Kansas City Chiefs free agent plan, so therefore they didn't have the cap space to sign DeAndre Hopkins. So this is kind of the Brett Veach special, where a guy that they were originally in on, but maybe didn't initially have the role or the money to offer that other teams did, so they miss out. But the Kansas City Chiefs, they always circle back around when the opportunity comes. Same way that they did with Juju Smith-Schuster this past offseason. He signed that big deal with New England a couple off seasons ago. The Chiefs weren't willing to match that. And then he gets cut just 1 year into that deal, comes back to Kansas City, and he's playing for dirt cheap and helping out. And obviously he's injured too, and we'll get to that in a second. But the DeAndre Hopkins acquisition just makes a ton of sense. And there was a lot of predated interest there. We know how bad the Kansas City Chiefs needed a wide receiver. And the great thing about this trade is that the Kansas City Chiefs acquire him, on Wednesday as they're about to start practice. So there is a very high possibility that DeAndre Hopkins plays this weekend against the Las Vegas Raiders. And they're going to need him because with Juju Smith-Schuster now hurt, you have 4 healthy wide receivers. You have 4 healthy wide receivers, and that is Xavier Worthy, Justin Watson, Sky Moore, and McCole Hardman. And do I even really need to mention Sky Moore as if he matters at all? I mean, you guys know how bad the situation was. We were approaching a situation in Kansas City where the Chiefs had to trade for a wide receiver now. This was no longer a situation where you could just wait until the trade deadline and see how your guys do. No. This wide receiver core showed that there's too many guys that you can't depend on. I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster, I'll mention him again. There was a thought in the back of our minds, a lot of us Chiefs fans, that when Juju Smith-Schuster had that 130-yard game against the New Orleans Saints, that this front office might go, well, maybe we can just make this work with the guys we have. But see, you can't do that because Juju Smith-Schuster is on the downside of his career. He struggled with leg injuries over the past few years. He's just not a guy that you can consistently depend on at this point in his career. You have to bring more in. You have to bring in more depth and more guys that you can depend on. The Chiefs were simply in desperate need of wide receiver help, and the DeAndre Hopkins acquisition could not have come at a better time because you needed something, man. You just did. Because this was really just McCole Hardman and Xavier Worthy. Because Juju has already been ruled out for the Raiders game, and that hamstring injury could linger for several weeks. So you needed someone. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to say that. You needed someone now. And there weren't too many better candidates than you could bring in than DeAndre Hopkins. Would I have liked someone a little bit younger, such as Deontay Johnson from the Carolina Panthers, who I also think is a good fit for the offense? Absolutely. But DeAndre Hopkins is probably a little bit more affordable because I expect the Titans to take on a large portion of his salary. And since Hopkins is a little bit older, you don't have to give up as much draft capital, and he's probably a little bit easier to pry away in that regard. And if you're to look at DeAndre Hopkins' stats this year, at first glance, you might think, what happened to him? Like, he's not really producing that much this year. But look at the quarterback situation in Tennessee. I mean, Will Levis has been far from spectacular, and DeAndre Hopkins last year had over 1,000 yards for the Tennessee Titans. This is still someone that has been productive as recently as last year. I just think you put him in this offense. I use the same logic with Juju whenever we signed him. He wasn't really doing anything in New England, but it was Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi, a revolving door of incompetent quarterbacks. So when people always come to me with concerns about, hey, this player hasn't really done anything or they haven't done much coming from their previous situation, I always kind of give them that bump given that they're now playing with Patrick Mahomes. Hopkins still has great hands. He's still very physical. He's still got plenty of speed, maybe not the same speed that he had 2-3 years ago, but he still has enough speed to get behind the defense, in my opinion. If there is one concern about his fit on this team, is that he's a contested catch specialist, and the Kansas City Chiefs offense doesn't really throw contested catches. Patrick Mahomes doesn't really throw 50-50 balls, although he's thrown more this year than he typically has because his current wide receiving room isn't really getting that kind of separation. And if you're Patrick Mahomes, you'd much rather throw a 50-50 ball to DeAndre Hopkins than Sky Moore or McCole Hardman. But I think what we might see is DeAndre Hopkins place an outside receiver like he's been doing for a lot of his career. But I also think they may move him in the slot to get the most possible yak out of DeAndre Hopkins, because that's what they like to do. They slid Juju in that role as soon as Rashee Rice got injured. And so I expect them to do a lot of the same with DeAndre Hopkins to maximize his potential and get the most possible out of him, because there's definitely still juice left in the tank here. It just cannot be understated how much this acquisition helps the Kansas City Chiefs. It's going to help Mahomes play a lot more relaxed, knowing that he's going to have that target that no matter what, if a play breaks down, he can look to, and there's still a very good chance that he'll be able to make a play. It takes pressure off Travis Kelce. It takes pressure off Xavier Worthy, who's only a rookie and was being asked to do a lot, given that it's only his first year in the league. It takes pressure off the guys that were already injured on the Chiefs to where now it's not such a pressing need that they have to come back because you have DeAndre Hopkins. Juju can take his time with his recovery. Hollywood Brown can take his time with his recovery. This benefits everyone involved. And my favorite part about this is DeAndre Hopkins is still under contract next year if the Chiefs would like to keep him around. And I think, at worst, Hopkins is an extremely valuable veteran to have in the wide receiver room that raises the floor for next year in case something like this happens again or you have bad injury luck. And we've talked about how Rashee Rice could be facing suspension in 2025 even after coming back from injury. Having DeAndre Hopkins is certainly going to help with that. So it's safe to say that I'm a huge fan of this move. I don't know how you couldn't be. You're not really giving up too much. It's a fair price for a proven wide receiver. Now, here's one thing I will say and one other slight concern that I would have with this trade. DeAndre Hopkins is currently nursing an MCL injury. He's 32 years old. I would still try to get another receiver. And with the injuries that have occurred, I think you have to still have an open mind when it comes to the wide receiver position. I wouldn't stop here. I would still call the Carolina Panthers about Deontay Johnson. It might be a little bit harder to work out now salary-wise because you just took on DeAndre Hopkins and the Chiefs don't have very much cap space. That would be best case scenario, though, a Deontay Johnson type move. But I would still be looking at a Darius Slayton or Demarcus Robinson. I'd be okay if the Chiefs acquired Demarcus Robinson now that they have DeAndre Hopkins. Now, beforehand, I wouldn't have been doing backflips for Demarcus Robinson or anything, but bringing him in along with DeAndre Hopkins, yeah, sure. Bringing a familiar face who knows the offense that can give you a little bit more than what the other guys can that you currently have. I'd be totally fine with that. I wouldn't stop here. I would have an extremely open mind. I would still dangle maybe another draft pick in front of another team that's not going anywhere for one of their wide receivers, because DeAndre Hopkins very well could get injured, or that MCL injury could linger, or he could re-aggravate it in a game, and then you're right back in the same position. You have to keep building that depth because you're going for a three-peat, and this is a very fragile situation that the Kansas City Chiefs are dealing with, and you got to keep Mahomes happy by continuing to feed him new weapons. So extremely excited to have DeAndre Hopkins in Kansas City. I think this was a match made in heaven. Super stoked to see this news this morning. It definitely brightened up my day. But with all that being said, guys, I want to hear from you down in the comments below. What do you think of the Kansas City Chiefs trading for Tennessee Titans star wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins? I want to hear from you guys. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. Make sure you turn on that notification bell for future videos. And make sure you check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com for more. I'll see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs!